Welcome to Stoughton Spotlight. I'm your host, Jeffrey Pickette. We're continuing our Conversations with the Candidates series, where I'll be sitting down with the residents who are running in contested races in this April's town election. On this program, we're featuring the race for the Board of Selectmen. There are 2 seats on the ballot for the Board of Selectmen in this town election, and on previous shows you may have heard me say that there were 6 candidates running, and while that still technically may be the case, since the taping of those shows and the taping of this one of the candidates announced that she will not be running, Pam Carr, and so there will only be 5 candidates competing for the spot of selectmen. So I just want to make that clear in case you hear me say 6 candidates running in other episodes. But that being said, let's introduce you to one of the candidates running for the Board of Selectmen, Rick Hill. So Rick, thank you for joining me today.
Thank you, Jeff, and I truly appreciate the opportunity to be here. These are great icebreakers for candidates to kind of wade into the campaign with.
Well, thank you, and that's exactly what this program is all about. So you had longtime Finance Committee service, and that's where probably a lot of people who follow town government know you from. So talk about your decision to wade into the Board of Selectmen race and to vie for that position.
Oh, sure. I think that my experience on the Finance Committee, along with other experiences in town, I'm a 14-year member of the town meeting. I'm the chair of the Charter Review Committee. I am currently on the High School Building Committee, and of course 9 years on the Board of the Finance Committee, which is by charter term limited, which is a good thing. We should probably look at more of that. And I'd had a number of folks talk to me and approach me over the years about this opportunity, and I'd always felt that we had good candidates in the chute, or that the board was pretty stable, and that it was in good hands. But I've been on the sidelines now for a year or so, and I've been kind of watching a lot of the projects and things that are happening in town, and felt that my background and experience would really lend themselves to helping. And again, my whole purpose is really just to help. So I'd be kind of plug and play in most cases. So certainly there's going to be a learning curve, but I already know a lot about the town, and a lot of relationships have been developed with a lot of the departments, department heads, obviously the financial structure of the town, the capital programs, et cetera. I'm very familiar with. We put a number of initiatives in place to try and help get our arms around some of the spending in town and things of that nature. So I just think that there are so many critical issues in town that it'd be important to kind of get back involved again.
So let's say, I think a great jumping off point would be to talk about the budget, where you have extensive background with the Finance Committee. And one topic that has come up particular this year with the budget has been the push to add more public safety officers for both police and fire. So I'd like to ask your opinion about that, but also in the guise of how that's affordable and how the town can make the dollars and cents add up in order to add more positions for public safety.
Great question. As my mantra has always been facts and data. So I don't manage by anecdotal information or by emotional information, but I think that the number I've heard is combined 23 new positions, and that's well over $2 million in additional payroll to the budget, which is certainly concerning, but there's also a need for additional fire safety, police safety staff at this point. So I think what we really have to do is to step back and see what we're spending money on at this point. The fire chief has gone out and found some grants to bullet finance the positions he's looking for. And this is a gradual buildup of, I think, 3 or 4 positions a year over the next 2 or 3 years. So his staff would grow by another 12, I believe, and the police are somewhere around that number as well. I think that we have to take a much harder look at our economic development program in town. We need to be able to target monies, I think, that are coming off of development in town. Stoughton's a good example of it, but there are others where legally you can't funnel those monies directly into those projects, but town meeting can certainly do that. We've built stabilization funds to help fund some of the asset programs in town. But we really do need to, higher taxes generally isn't, is not the answer. 2.5 is probably going to be, stable with us, but it only represents about 60% of our revenue. So
sure, and you mentioned the Prop 2.5, and it seems that towns that try to override that, Easton, for example, same night that Stoughton last year was going for the debt exclusion with the new high school, Easton's going for the Prop 2.5, really an operational override, and it doesn't work in a lot of towns, and it didn't work there. Yeah,
and that's a good point. I mean, just to have an override to fund operations makes no sense. So, let's be smart about it and look at how we're spending monies today, and see if see how we'll be able to get the best bang for our buck. But we just can't add $2 million in payroll without funding sources for it. And the cost of doing business goes up in town by 2.5% automatically. If you just think about all the obligations we have already existing with contractual raises and increases, things of that nature. So,
what are some other budget items that maybe have caught your eye, looking, what the selectmen or the town, the finance committee, the school committee is looking at heading into this town meeting?
Well, the schools chew up a big piece of the budget, and rightly so. Of course, they're educating all of our children, and it's 4,000 kids in the system, and 600 teachers on the payroll. So I think that they're increasing about 3.8% this year. Last year it was 2.5%. But this year they're getting the biggest hit of a recently renegotiated contract. So there's a hefty increases for the payroll in there, and I think that accounts for the majority of the increase. Other concerns in town, I think the finance committee always has a soft spot in my heart, but they're trying to do well by not spending, say, free cash, of which there's a lot of it this year, on operations. So in the past, those monies have been targeted more towards cash spending on articles, rather than becoming reliant upon them in the operation.
Just to add for context, free cash, nothing's truly free.
Right. So free cash essentially is the unspent money at the end of the year. That has to be then certified by the state. Yep, these funds have not been expended and can go back into the revenue sheets for the following year. So usually takes about 2 cycles to get it back in again. Mm-hmm. So this year we have an excess of $5 million. But with the proposed increases in positions that are out there, it's all been spent. So that's very concerning. And I think we have to take a much closer look at that and figure out how we wean ourselves off of that. And some of that has to do with budgeting as well. Excise taxes are generally calculated at 95% of history. And we end up with overages in those areas. Meals, hotels and meals taxes tend to kind of come in higher than we planned for, which counts for more overages. So if we had more money in the operating budget, because we're forecasting better, but we've been conservative in that respect, and I'm happy about that. I'd rather be worried about having too much money or under planning money than over planning it and not having it.
Sure. Some issues that are certainly going to face the board day one will be a town manager situation, where the board deciding not to renew the current town manager's contract, and his contract expires at the end of the fiscal year. As a member of the Board of Selectmen, if elected, what would your playbook be? What would your process be in order to pick a new town manager? Or I should rephrase that. First of all, do you think that there needs to be a new town manager?
I have a working relationship with this town manager just because of my prior experiences as a volunteer. I think that the town manager is highly experienced, highly knowledgeable, and capable in his role. I'm concerned about the process of how it came to that his contract was not renewed. He is due reviews, annual reviews. He hasn't had a review for the last 2 years. He's been put on the agenda for disciplinary issues and then taken off subsequently when he demanded his right to be heard, these things to be heard in public. So all of this concerns me. So I'm not settled on the fact that we need to replace him. I'm I'm just concerned about process, and I don't think the process has been completely equitable here. So I think that we need to look closer at that. I'm not, certainly it's been said that he can certainly reapply for his job, but
well, you'd have to work pretty quickly. I mean, and by the time April, the election day comes around, we're talking 3 months before the end of the fiscal year, less than that. So that's not a lot of time to get an interim in place or to extend or renegotiate a contract or find a new permanent candidate. So how would you go about those 3 months playing those out?
Well, I certainly wouldn't, and I don't mean this as a dig, but it took us almost 10 months to find, to settle on a police chief that, we had in place already. So, and again, I think that, Donna McNamara is going to do a great job. She's going to be super in that role. But the process was awful, and we need to fix that. It's like I said, if we end up having to replace the town manager because he decides that he is not, he doesn't want that position anymore, or we are going to go out to advertise for it, it'll take all of 3 months to get to surface candidates and get them interviewed and through the process. And that would be a rapid pace for us in this town. So I don't see that happening. I think we have to think about if the town manager left at that point, we'd have to have an interim, and we'd have to think it through that way. But that would not be my preference.
And just for context, the last time the town was in this situation, Joe Feaster served as interim town manager for close to a year.
Yep. Yeah, and Joe did a fine job. I liked working with Joe. He brought peace to the town and the school sides of the world, and he has my deepest appreciation for all of his work there. So, but again, we had to go out and hire an interim based on candidates. We had to look for candidates and bring them in and interview, et cetera. So, while this was all going on in the background, I'd rather not put us through that again.
And you talked about the process with the police chief, and you were clear in your support of Donna, but you mentioned the process. What would you have done differently? What do you feel was that the board may have could have done better?
Well, and immediately they had restricted the search to in-house. And so I said, okay, because we've got a lot of good folks that have been long in their roles and training and have certainly got a lot of qualification. So consider that parameter and set it aside. Then we went about the process of going through procurement to find an outside agency to be able to sort through or do some surveys or to help us pick a candidate, and we ended up stumbling over that, and we lost time. And then in the very end of the process, we had all these good folks at the police department apply, and at some point they thought they were going to get interviewed and never did. And I think that that's kind of an injustice. I just think that was it was bad form on our part, and I don't think it sent the right message to all those folks. And so I would have changed all of that. And I wouldn't want to, the Board of Selectmen aren't the human resources experts in town. So be guided by the experts and, work within the process and the parameters. And I think that we were just we were in disarray with, things of that nature.
Well, let's talk about the inner workings of the board itself. What do you observe? What's your take on the way the board is operating at this current moment?
I'm not sure that there's a lot of cohesion, and it worries me. So I think that civility is an important piece of that. I think that there's, the board has to respect each and every member that's on the board, and civility is important. And I think somehow we kind of missed that a little bit. So I just would look for a more cohesive board go forward, and to stay focused on the issues and not be sidetracked by non-factual, non-data-driven information.
Well, how does one member of the board help do that? How can the board do that in general? Because once the debates get going and things become heated, things are said, and that's when it seems to break down.
Well, and I think that that's the whole key, Jeff, is not to get heated. So I think I've kind of got a demonstrated record as the chair of the Finance Committee for 4 years, vice chairs for 4 years prior to that, of maintaining order. And it really is one person, is able to do that. And if you don't participate in that part of it, then it continues to build more credibility about the process. So I would choose not to behave that way.
Let's talk vision. What you hope to do, and if elected, with the 3 years, of Selectman's term. Where do you want to take this town? What are some things you'd like to do?
Well, it's like I said, we've got a lot of projects in the pipeline that I think are just going to raise all ships in the pond. So the new library is a terrific project. I was disappointed that at some point we were trying to look to step back from that, but we're moving ahead on it. I think when it came up about 2 years ago to be, I think town meeting had to re-vote on it because one of the parameters of the project changed. I always stop to think about those kind of things. Oh, I got $14 million. What am I going to do with it? Do I build a library on that postage stamp size of a lot that it's on right now, or do we put it over with maybe the Council on Aging and those folks over there? Put all of our services over there, veterans, visiting nurses. So I just try to think outside the box of, if we're in this moment, let's think through it. So new library, great idea. Or excuse me, a renovated library, great idea. I think it'll benefit the town. There's so many folks that use it. Pat Bazin and her team do a terrific job. The new high school certainly is going to be a significant add to the town. And I think all those things add to the property values in town, and that affects the tax base, and those things naturally generate revenue without raising taxes, which is really benefit for our town. And that's what I'm really looking for, is to reduce the tax burden and raise the level of services in the town. So if we're beefing up our fire and police teams, departments, we're looking at new fire safety facilities, so combining those groups and giving them better tools to do their job. Over the course of 9 years on the Finance Committee, I think we added 3 new firefighters just to fund that second ambulance. But again, there's been a number of openings and gaps, and it's a timing thing. If you're down 6 people, you don't have them to staff the department, so you've got to figure out a calculus to accommodate that. And the new chief is on that, and I'm really appreciative of the work he's doing. So again, all of these projects that are in town that are happening are going to take cooler heads to prevail, and to have focus, and to keep in mind that we're here for the taxpayers. I mean, I'm a taxpayer, you're a taxpayer, everybody's, we're here for the folks that live here, and making life better is the key ingredient.
Now, you mentioned some outside-the-box thinking, and it seems like when projects are done, it's just that you're looking at that individual project. There isn't that grand scope of, like you mentioned, adding the veteran services and the VNA and the library and the Council on Aging together. What can you do, or what can be done to kind of get that mode of thinking in motion and in place?
Sure. Well, certainly the master plan was a great way to start that, and there's a lot of great thinking that's going on in there, and if we execute on a lot of those ideas, I think that we'll be much better off. So if we think about the town center and how we can make that better, there's a lot of thoughts about how to make that better, but we need to at some point stop thinking about it and pull the trigger. There are things that are certainly factors in there. What are you going to do with the railroad? Is it coming? Is it not? Is it South Coast, et cetera? So we need to settle on that. The projects that are in town certainly are a big piece, but the Board of Selectmen really need a 3 to 5 year plan. The schools would actually do an excellent job at that in terms of curriculum and developing the scholastics for the schools. But the Board of Selectmen has had a number of false starts in trying to come up with a 3 to 5 year vision. And again, it's like I said, the master plan is a good place to get your arms around it. But we've got so many wonderful things happening in this town. And I mean, if you just think about our open spaces and Glen Echo and the other attractions in town that we can capitalize on, I think there's opportunity, but we really need to to settle down and to focus on those kind of things.
And you bring up Glen Echo, so good topic to go into. When that was sold at town meeting, you saw a lot of pictures from yesteryear and what Glen Echo used to be. And that certainly hasn't come to fruition yet. Not sure if it will, but what would you like to see done at that space? I know that there's a committee and that there are, occasional updates, but haven't heard much news on that lately.
Yeah, and I think the last update is they've just finished a topographical survey, which had to be done before they could proceed. So now that that's done, I think that they can now bring in their planning and consultant groups to be able to figure out exactly what can be done with the space. I'd love to see it as a swimming hole. I'd love to see picnic tables and maybe a ball field or horseshoes or bocce or all those kind of things where our residents can just go and relax on an afternoon or a weekend and just have it as another jewel in the crown.
And you mentioned downtown, always a hot topic. When can we stop talking about that? Because it seems like, and that kind of goes to another point you made where things are discussed, but not a lot of things seem to get done about it. So when can we stop talking about downtown? When can that be solved?
Yeah. It's from what I understand, there's a project down there, of course, it's going to replace the shell of the building that's been burned out down there for so many years, and I think that they have just kind of gotten past the last piece of that. So if we can start moving that ahead, that's terrific. The State Theater was supposed to be a huge piece of that, and recently I think that building has changed hands, and that's kind of changed the formula a little bit. So the team that's working on that, John Stagnone and his wife, and the folks behind that project are working through that piece. And we still got the South Coast Rail to contend with. But I think that wherever we can push a button on any piece of that, then we need to. And I think we should be done scheming about this and then seeing what elements of it we can do to execute on right now.
Sure, and one of the topics that gets brought up a lot in the downtown is the post office, and how do you need the post office, maybe the building itself in the downtown, but certainly not the storage of the trucks, and that's a lot of space. Right. What's your thoughts on that?
Well, I'd love to work with the post office to figure out if there was better space that the town had that they might be able to utilize just as effectively. And maybe that building doesn't need to be there. Maybe that's the much needed parking space that we need down there. It's just.
Well, do you feel there's a need for parking down there?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, and I would think that we're going to have to repurpose some space to be able to accommodate that. So to be able to draw more people down into that area, more vendors, et cetera. So, but I think that at this point, if we can just focus on that at this point, then a lot will get done. But the post office itself, I think, can go in a number of spaces. It does not have to be where it is, and the town has land and facilities available that might work with them. So I'd love to work with them on relocating them to a different spot.
Sure. Now, what type of downtown do you envision? Is it one in which there's it's bustling commerce center, or is it really just the traffic flows by better? There's businesses like there are now, but it's not a center of activity. Well, where do you kind of fall in that?
I think if I had my ultimate, which I don't really think is probable, it'd be green space. So the whole town center would just be walking space and shops and places where people could go, and the traffic would work its way around the town. So submerge the rail, put a roadway over that, and make that the path around town. So I think I'm really reaching on that vision, but when you ask me, that's what comes to mind.
Sure. Realistically, though?
Yeah, realistically, I think that I'd love to see a lot of specialty shops and restaurants downtown that bring people in, particularly after hours, that would really build up that area and, again, give us more destinations and things to do in town rather than folks having to leave town to go find those kind of things in other places. So we've just got a great opportunity down there, and there's a lot of great historic buildings and a lot of things that can be done new. And I think that we should just finish on that vision.
Now, this election in particular has seemed to drawn a lot of interest from candidates. There's there's 5 candidates vying for selectman. There's 3 for town moderator. There's 3 for the school committee. What brought out this interest where in years past you don't see as much competition? I mean, you don't have to go back too far for a Board of Selectmen race that was uncontested.
Yeah. I'm not sure what's completely driving it, but there are new folks in town and people that have kind of been coming up through the ranks. So if you look at the moderator's race, there's new blood there, and there's people with experience in other facets of the town. So it just felt with a lot of the initiative that was happening at town meeting that maybe they felt that they could help propel that forward. So I thought that was good. I think all the folks running for office is a terrific thing. The Board of Selectmen, 6 candidates, actually 5 now that Pam is stepping back, and she's doing that selflessly. She thinks that there are too many candidates in the race at this point, and it'll just distract. And she was a terrific candidate. I really looked forward to having her in the race. So, but there's there's some concerns on the Board of Selectmen right now about again how we're managing through things. And it's like I said, I've touched on the police chief's selection process, and concerns about the library and the schools and things of that nature, that they're just very sensitive and important topics, and I think that people felt that they needed to step up and get involved.
So as we're closing down, final minute here, I told you the 30 minutes goes by pretty quickly.
It really does.
Yeah. Make a pitch to voters as to why you should be one of their 2 selections for the Board of Selectmen.
Sure. Again, I think that I bring a tremendous amount of background and experience. I've been schooled and trained in the town of Stoughton in terms of public service. So I think my wife and I and our 2 children have been very blessed. We feel an obligation to give back. We feel an obligation to volunteer. And so this is us doing that. My wife is currently on the school committee, and I think that with my varied background in the finance committee, as a town meeting member, as the charter review, knowing that document as well as I do, and now currently on the high school building committee, those things all give me great qualifications, great experience to be able to really just plug and play and to help immediately get involved and to help keep moving us forward. There's certainly a learning curve for anybody getting involved with an office of that level. And I have to say, I truly respect the Board of Selectmen. Whether you agree with them or not, people that give that kind of time and commitment to that position is can only be applauded. So I truly appreciate everybody's service, particularly in that capacity, on any of our boards, but particularly Board of Selectmen, school committee, things of that nature.
Well, Rick, thank you so much for joining me today, and thank you for tuning in to this episode of Stoughton Spotlight, our Conversations with the Candidates series. Thank you to Michael Hammond for directing. And remember to vote in this upcoming April town election. Contested races for the Board of Selectmen, school committee, and town moderator. Once again, I'm Jeffrey Pickette. Thanks for tuning in.